Of all the crazy things that happen on the internet every day, you really cannot get crazier than shootings that happen during live sessions on Instagram. In this video, we have 11 of the most insane stories of rappers who were involved in shootings while they were live on Instagram. Number 1 on this list actually died on the spot. Indian Red Boy. Indian Red Boy was shot to death in broad daylight while sitting in his car during an Instagram live session with his close friend and fellow gang member, Capone. Prior to the attack, the two had been chatting and responding to fans who had joined the live session. However, that very bright day became extremely gloomy, as in a split second. Red Boy looked up outside his car, and almost immediately several gunshots followed. Red Boy tried to take cover in the car, but so many shots were fired that it was impossible for him to survive this one. As the shots went off, Capone, who was on the other end of the live session, began to call out to Red Boy to find out his location. Already covered in his blood, Red Boy consistently called for help and then mustered the strength to whisper his location in Hawthorne. Not long after, his phone dropped and the live session ended. According to the police report, Indian Red Boy was found slumped in the front seat of the car, having taken several bullets. He was declared dead on the scene. The attacker was long gone before the authorities made it to the scene of the crime, and no one was arrested in connection to the murder of Indian Red Boy. Despite reviewing surveillance footage from CCTV cameras in the area, the only certain thing was that Red Boy had been directly targeted by the attacker. The police considered it a gang-related killing without releasing any more details about the investigation or how it was handled. A quick look at Red Boy's social media pages, which are now private, reveals his involvement in the unkind street life of drugs and guns. Several theories have circulated concerning the murder of Indian Red Boy and how he was caught slacking. One of the two main theories is related to Indian Red Boy's close affiliation with Capone, while the other seems to be a ghost from Red Boy's past that haunted him to death. Capone had disrespected and defaced the mural of a highly held member of an opposition gang, Nipsey Hussle of the Rolling 60s Crips. Capone was a member of the IFG, and the two gangs had remained in a long-standing beef for years. Capone not only defaced the mural of a respected member of the gang, but also signed his name on it, so they would not be confused about who would have the audacity to do such a thing. As expected, this sparked outrage in the camp of the Rolling 60s Crips, and threats were made against Capone and the IFG. Other members of the IFG, including Indian Red Boy, stood solidly behind Capone's actions. With that in mind, it was highly speculated that the attack that led to the eventual death of Indian Red Boy was simply a repercussion of his strong affiliation with Capone. The other theory propped up a few weeks after Red Boy's murder, claiming that Red Boy was murdered by a member of his former gang. Red Boy was not always a member of the IFG, and rumor has it that he left the former gang on very bad terms, and the shooting was just a tying up of a loose end by the Hollywood Peru. Kodak Black. He is a rapper that needs no introduction. Kodak Black combined a very successful career with constant run-ins with the law that were never in his favor. Black was involved with the streets from a very young age, and he escaped with just a bullet to the leg after a shooting on the 12th of February 2022. Unlike the almost obviously gang-related killing of Indian Red Boy, this was supposed to be a regular night out for Kodak Black. It was just outside an after-party organized by Justin Bieber. Kodak Black and a couple of others had been chilling, chatting, and catching some air on the street when a fight broke out on the scene. It is unclear what had triggered the fight, the persons involved, and why Kodak chose to get involved as well. What we do know is that Kodak got involved in the fight and started taking a swing and stomping on someone on the ground. Right in the middle of the brawl, one of the men, who was never identified, pulled out a gun and started to fire. Police reports claim that 10 gunshots were fired on site. Thankfully, none of these shots killed anyone, however. 4 people were injured on site, including Kodak Black. This did not come as a surprise to most fans, as Kodak Black already had a record of violent behavior that usually got him in trouble. At the age of 15, Black had been sent to juve 3 times. To make matters even worse, he could have ended up in prison for the rest of his life in 2013, but for the intervention of dollars and deals. The recording studio saw some potential in the music that Kodak had already put out and decided to bankroll premium lawyers that got him off the hook in this case, with just 3 years of probation. Despite the success that he attained under the new label and growing popularity, Black could not turn away from the streets and violence that raised him. He was consistently in one headline or the other for a crime or two. A good example would be a case in October 2015 that had him arrested for charges of robbery, assault, kidnapping, and unsurprisingly, the possession of marijuana. The year after that, the Kodak Black was arrested at least 6 times in 2016. For a successful rapper, Black was plagued with such a criminal record that it became a regular occurrence. I guess you can take the boy out of the streets, but never the streets out of the boy. Now, if you found that record disturbing, wait till you hear this next story. Spider D. Spider D's near-death experience is a testament to just just how easily one can go from taking a regular chill walk on the street to getting popped by the enemy. In May of 2020, Spider D had been taking a walk while on an Instagram live session chatting with fans who had joined in. He was originally discussing his plans for new releases and future projects. However, he shortly began to drift into conversations about opposite gang members. Almost as soon as he started talking about the enemy, a car was heard pulling up close to Spider and multiple gunshots went off.
You know what they say about the with the hoodie on in the summertime on BD? He ain't out here trying to play. BD in. Right up.
Spider immediately started sprinting for his life to get cover from the shots being fired. Still on the scamper to take cover, he also pulled out his weapon in case of necessity. The live session was still running and revealed the weapon that Spider D had pulled out of nowhere. As expected, this was heavily rumored to be a gang-related shooting. Apparently, word on the street was that Spider had popped a member of the Gangster Disciple named Geeski. Apart from the generational beef between the Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples gang that Spider D belongs to, a video going around showed the two men arguing during an Instagram live session. By only what I can attribute to sheer luck and a literal miracle, Spider D managed to get out of this situation without taking any hit whatsoever. However, this did not teach Spider a lesson about social media and the level of vigilance that is required when there are so many ops waiting on the slightest slip up to drop you. Sometime in January of 2023, Spider D was attacked in a Walmart parking lot and this time took hits. That landed him in the hospital. Spider had been shopping at a Walmart outlet and decided to post an Instagram story from the location while he was still there. Spider and two others were offloading the purchases into his car when a black sedan pulled up next to the car and let off the fireworks. The man and woman took hits to the leg and arm respectively and were expected to recover without problems. Spider D, on the other hand, reported taking critical shots to the back and chest and was said to be in a critical condition, according to the news report. While the reports never identified the people involved in the shooting, however, the only thing that spreads faster than a word on the streets is lightning. Before long, it was out that Spider had been hit in a drive-by shooting at the Walmart parking lot. After the prior shooting that was recorded on his Instagram Live, Spider D made comments in an interview about how none of that moved him and that it was the weakest attack he had experienced. While he survived the Walmart attack, the critical injuries he sustained from the multiple bullets that pierced his skin were definitely not a weak attack. Some reports claim that Spider D made the smart decision to lay low and become more cautious about his activities on social media. Snapdog, this Detroit artist, was having a very regular night hanging out with his friends on the block and responding to fans on Instagram Live. Out of the blue, someone seemed to be shouting at the group off camera. The person asked which of them was Snap, and with all boldness, knowing that things were about to get heated, Snap responded to identify himself. There was a bit of back and forth between the group and the person off camera, and shortly after, Snap put down his phone and started firing gunshots in the direction of the unknown person.
You already know. Snap. What's happening?
This was not a surprising occurrence for anyone who had been following Snapdog since the start of his career. Snapdog was born into a life surrounded by drugs, guns, and violence, and he did not stray far from the lifestyle. His father was a prominent dealer in Detroit who made a very decent living from selling drugs with his group called Foru Spot Boys. He reportedly made as much as $15K on a daily basis before ending up behind bars. Snapdog also lost his twin brother to crime, who got shot while trying to break into the home of a retired police officer. All of these factors eventually contributed to Snapdog getting into drugs at a very young age to take care of his mother. As expected, all the wildness and violence that came with dealing drugs became part and parcel of Snapdog's life. It was not until he nearly faced 25 years in prison that Snapdog decided to invest more time in his music career. Inspired by artists like Chief Keef and Lil Durk, Snap started making drill music with a Detroit spin to it. It did not take long to get the attention of Chief Keef, who signed him and moved him out to Los Angeles. The polarizing style of Snapdog's music videos and social media lifestyle got him a lot of attention. He would usually show up on the internet and in music videos shooting real guns, and this drew more eyes to his music. Unfortunately, his street-oriented life was drawing both wanted and unwanted attention. Apart from drawing fans to check out his work, all the guns and violence that was present on his social media started drawing the attention of cops. In one interview, he mentioned that he was just showing his actual life on camera. He eventually made the decision to dial down the violence that he was putting on the internet, just so he could stay off the radar of the men in blue. Snap Dogg lost only his father to jail time, but this next rapper had both parents in jail at a very young age. Honeycomb Brazy. This particular story is a perfect depiction of how ops can run up on you at any given time, and you must be geared and ready at all times. Honeycomb Brazy had just purchased a Kobe Bryant jersey in November 2020 and decided to go live on Instagram to show it to his fans. With Brazy's history, which we will get into in a bit, it did not come as much of a surprise that he was not alone at the time of the incident. He had a bunch of friends with him, chilling and having a good time as Brazy engaged with fans on the live stream. Less than 10 minutes into the live session, Brazy looked up with a suspicious countenance, and then the fireworks began. Brazy abandoned his phone and hurriedly called out for his gun while the exchange of gunfire continued in the background.
Dead weight.
Brazy went on to release CCTV footage that showed the events of that day from a wider angle than his phone camera. It showed the group hanging out in front of a barber shop when a gray SUV drives by, and then the chaos begins. Thanks to the cover and weapon readiness of Brazy and his crew, Honeycomb Brazy was able to get out of this situation alive and unharmed. This was just one of the many situations, attacks, and near-death experiences that Honeycomb Brazy had experienced in the last few years. Apart from some of his hit songs, what made this rapper really popular had more to do with his reputation on the streets. Brazy's life has been steadily plagued by controversy, with both of his parents in jail during his childhood, and then growing up in the streets exposed to everything from violence to drugs and guns. At the age of 27, he had already spent 10 years in prison, been shot more times than you would be able to count with your fingers, and even had beef so hard it cost his grandparents' lives in a house fire. What really sealed Brazy's fate on the streets was the death of his childhood friend Stank. Stank entered his girlfriend's home and found Brazy alone with his girlfriend. An argument ensued despite Brazy explaining that he was just there to sell her some weed. Stank and Brazy got into a fight that ended in Stank's death. Brazy managed to get away with it without facing jail time, but the implications for him on the streets were not any better. Stank was a popular and loved member of society, and his death created a lot of enemies for Brazy on the streets. This put a target on Brazy's back. He was constantly getting shot at everywhere he went, so much so that he could not move around normally and freely anymore. With that in mind, Brazy had most likely seen so many attacks that it was now difficult to ambush him, as he was always ready for a showdown. Unlike Honeycomb Brazy, this next rapper was not ready for what hit him, and I don't think you are either. Navy Pooh. Navy Pooh was on a joyride around Miami with a woman in the passenger seat and 2 children in the back believed to be his kids. The group stopped at a red light, and in what seemed to be a very well-planned attack, a gray Lexus packed with men stopped next to Navy's car at the traffic stop. The men began emptying their guns in the direction of Navy Pooh's car. The attackers reportedly shot 80 bullets during this attack. Unsurprisingly, Navy Pooh died in this attack. The woman and children are said to have survived without any injuries, but they definitely left the scene with the trauma that is bound to affect anyone who experiences such a thing. Like most of the rappers on our list today, Navy Pooh had a pretty successful career working on projects alongside big names like Lil Yachty, Migos, and Lil Baby. But another thing that was part of Navy's life was the violence and crime that raised him on the streets of Liberty City, Miami. Navy Pooh believed he did not have a better shot at success than to get his hands dirty in the streets after getting denied scholarships from all the schools he wanted. His first hit came in 2020, but was known to still be heavily involved with street and gang-related activities. The attack that killed him was not the first of its kind. Prior to the drive-by that took Navy Pooh's life, he had gotten involved in one shooting that connected him to a bunch of cases all over Miami. In May of 2020, Navy was out with his crew when a group of enemies showed up with weapons hot and started firing at Navy and his group. During this attack, Navy took a bullet to the leg, but it was not enough to stop him from firing his own shots back at the ops. After police investigated the crime scene and picked up evidence, casings picked up at the scene were used to connect Wavy to a large number of incidents in Miami within a 1-year period. This makes it obvious that Navy was definitely involved in some shady business that got him popped at the traffic stop. Navy had spoken in the past about how it felt like someone he knew died in a shooting almost every week. Sad that the same fate ended him in such a horrifying manner. But if you considered any of these events crazy, then the sheer boldness famous of this next rapper will shock you, Deuce. Going live and chatting with fans was a common activity for Deuce, a Memphis-based rapper with a pretty successful career. However, merely starting a live session to relate with his fans seemed to have become boring for Deuce. Hence, he decided to add a bit of a spin on it. Sometime in September 2020, Duke started a live session and started out with good old chatter with fans who had joined in. For whatever reason, Duke decided to pivot the conversation and start taunting the people living within the hood he was chilling at. He was at the Pepper Tree Apartments at the time and started calling out ops in the area to try and mess with him. Deuce had barely finished his sentence when gunshots started to rattle in the background. As the shots continued to get closer and louder, Deuce decided to do the wise thing and run for his life. He kept the live session going as he was seen sprinting away from the chaos. The live stream eventually ended very abruptly with no clear information about whether Deuce got hit or not.
Come outside and with me, Pepper Tree. We ain't on none of that bougie, none of that Hollywood shit.
Nonetheless, it may have been that Deuce was just a little shaken up by the event. A couple of hours after the shooting, Deuce posted a video on his page informing fans that he was very much alive and did not get hit by any of the shots that were fired in his direction. In the same video, Deuce went on to taunt his ops about being too weak to get him and to try better on the next try. A pretty bold statement from someone who could barely catch his breath as he was sprinting away from the enemy just a few hours prior. But the part that makes this story even more interesting is that Deuce was not the only one with a mouth and social media handle to taunt. After Duke posted the video, some of his ops started showing up on social media, equally taunting and laughing at him as a result of the attack. They were also nice enough to warn him to be a lot more careful when he goes live. In this case, going live may not have been the problem, but getting into enemy territory and choosing to call them out was a really risky move that could have easily cost him his life at that moment. Bugatti Casino. Bugatti Casino is a Texas-based rapper that got involved in crime at a really young age. However, it was not his affiliation to any criminal activity that got him involved in a shooting while on IG Live. Bugatti Casino had been parked at an unknown location, chilling in what looked like the back seat of a car. He started an Instagram Live talking to fans and reacting to comments, but shortly after he was confronted by a stranger. The person asked the group to move their car because they were parked in front of his house. Bugatti Casino was not having any of it and refused to repark the car. The conversation soon transitioned into an argument, and the man began trying to get into the car. Chaos makes it a little difficult to properly understand what is going on, but there was an obvious struggle before gunshots started going off in the background and the live session ended. With Bugatti's background, it does not come as much of a surprise that he was unwilling to move just because some stranger said so. By the time Bugatti Casino was becoming an adult, he had already been sent to juve about 25 times. A lot of the time, it only took about a week before he was back in for one crime or the other. His first experience was at the tender age of 9 years old when he was sent to juve for a burglary case. The turning point for Bugatti Casino only came after he did 6 years in prison at the age of 17. On getting out, he decided to take music more seriously and get off the streets. The sad truth, though, is that not everyone gets the chance to live long enough to turn their lives around, and this next rapper falls into that unfortunate category. PSO EMT. PSO EMT was a promising young and vibrant act just starting to build his portfolio before his life was cut short. Like most of the stories we have seen so far, PSO EMT's situation was also a case of revealing their location on social media. PSO EMT was in a group heading to a funeral for another teenage friend who had died in Memphis. On the walk down to the funeral, PSO EMT's cousin, PSO Didi, started a live session showing the group on their way. During the live stream, Didi switched up and started addressing the ops. For reasons best known to the teenager, he taunted the ops about never being on them or attacking them. Well, I guess he did get what he wanted, because shortly after the live stream, a black SUV arrived at the scene and the men inside started shooting at PSO EMT and his cousin Didi. The attackers sped off right after the shooting, and PSO EMT lost his young life right on the scene. His cousin, on the other hand, was immediately hospitalized to receive emergency treatment. On the surface, this looks like a pretty regular gang attack, but testimonies following the attack would tell a different story. Based on testimonies by Emmett's mother and others who were close to the family, Emmet was never involved in the violence of street life, as much as he portrayed guns and street life in his music videos, and even rapped about the streets. His family claimed that he lived a very normal teenage life. His videos had packed hundreds of thousands of views from a couple of songs that went viral. PSO grew into quite the sensation and a local big name with hits like Sliding and PSO Fluo. He was was off to a promising start and already on the track to becoming one of the biggest names out of Memphis. But underneath all that was just a 16-year-old teenager who just went to school, worked at Wendy's, and really enjoyed making music. He may have managed to avoid the street life, but somehow, the lifestyle he showed in his music and videos caught up with him in real life. The motive of this shooting was never understood, but 2 men were later arrested in connection to the shooting. Could PSO Emmett's death have been avoided if Dee Dee did not go live calling out the ops and revealing their location at the time? We'll never know now, but this is quite the lesson on being more cautious about the information you put on the internet. On that note, this next rapper is surrounded by quite a lot of controversy. Io Dev was one of the biggest artists from Mississippi at the time of his death. He had started an Instagram live session to chat with fans. Io Dev was singing along to a track playing from what sounded like a car sound system when the strangest thing happened. It is worth pointing out that there are conflicting opinions on what really happened that day, as the available video from the live stream does not show anything other than Io's face. The only thing that is heard is a single gunshot and what looks like Io and his phone dropping to the ground. Shortly after the incident, Io Dev's friends flooded his Instagram page with tributes and condolence messages to his family, and asking fans to pray for the family as well. But what makes this even weirder is that while you may have concluded based on the live video that Io was ambushed and killed, the police claim that it may have been a suicide. How this conclusion was derived still remains a mystery, but regardless, many people on social media also hold the same opinion. While I must admit that is very unclear what exactly happened in Vicksburg, Mississippi on this fateful day, it is also difficult to believe that a young rapper with an entire career ahead of him would just choose to off himself, and more so on social media for the world to see. Io Dev's past and involvement in the streets are also unknown, hence I cannot also conclude that this was an execution by his ops. What do you think? Leave a comment below as we jump into the final name on today's list. Fasten your seatbelts for this perfect tale of getting exactly what you asked for, Raleigh Bands. This is yet another one of those stories that make you wonder if the loss of life could have been avoided. In the case of this rapper paving his way out of Tampa, Florida, Raleigh Bands considered it a gangster idea to call out his enemies on Instagram. At the time, the young rapper seemed to have been getting a lot of criticism, but whatever caused his death had to be more than just a thing with critics. So what exactly happened? Well, Raleigh Bands started all of it with an Instagram story post that read, "A lot of these niggas know where I live at FR. I sleep in peace. If a nigga wants smoke, I'm at my crib in 5 minutes." At this stage, no one knows the backstory behind this post that was made, and if he was referring specifically to a person or group of enemies. Either way, someone took him up on the invitation and gave him what he asked for. According to the police records, the shooting happened at around 3:30 in the parking lot of his apartment building in Tampa. This was just about 5 minutes after the post went up on his story. When police officers and emergency services arrived, Raleigh Bands was rushed to the hospital, but it was already too late for him, as he had already died. According to witnesses, the suspects got away in a vehicle before the police arrived. Investigators believe that the killers may have been people who were already familiar with Bands. There is no word or prior record of Raleigh's known enemies, and there is also no confirmation about his involvement in the streets. This makes it even harder to pin the murder on any suspects. The twist in the story came about a week after the killing, when a suspect was arrested in the murder of Raleigh Bands. The 25-year-old Darren Day was arrested by U.S. Marshals and charged with first-degree murder. Another suspect named Demon Speed was also picked up about a week after the first arrest in connection to the murder of Raleigh Bands. He was charged with premeditated first-degree murder and a felon in possession of a firearm. There was never any detailed information about who these suspects are, how they were found to be connected to Raleigh's murder, or their motive for killing the rapper. All things considered, Raleigh Bands gave an open check to anyone who was willing to take a shot at him. He surely had to know that he had enemies, and such a statement was making the job almost too easy for his ops, and gave the motivation they needed to launch an attack. The situation sparked a series of conversations on social media, with some saying that he brought it upon himself. Some others refuted that no matter what he said, he did not deserve to die like that. Well, those are all the names that we can take in this video. In the end, these shootings showed the very violent reality of local rappers who still have strong ties with the streets. Well, if you enjoyed this video, then you definitely want to check out some other even more mind-blowing stories on the channel. A good place to start would be with the one on your screen right now. Click the card, and I'll see you in that video.